On a rainy night in London, a lonely millionaire dined in silence, surrounded by luxury, yet suffocated by an emptiness that success had never filled. Outside, a hungry girl defied security and entered the restaurant with just one innocent request. "Can I eat with you, Daddy?" This sentence shattered Gerald Morrison's guarded world, initiating a turn of events neither of them could have foreseen. But what began as a gesture of compassion forever transformed the life of a man and the destiny of a child forgotten by the streets. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We're continuing. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The Fasano restaurant, located in the Mayfair area of London, was one of those places where money spoke louder than anything else. On that rainy June evening, as London's elite took refuge in its elegant interior, Gerald Morrison occupied a table by the window alone. At 48 years old, he owned one of the country's largest construction companies, with ventures that reshaped the city's skyline. His austere face, framed by prematurely graying hair, reflected in the glass as he distantly observed the illuminated Oxford Street. The sommelier had just served a glass of imported red wine, but Gerald barely touched it. The main course before him, a sophisticated fillet with mushroom sauce, remained practically untouched. It wasn't the first time he had dined alone. In fact, it had become an almost daily ritual. His cell phone vibrated insistently on the table with notifications of emails and work messages. But he ignored it, as if that small rebellion was the only form of control he still possessed over his life. "Any problem with the dish, Mr. Morrison?" asked the maitre d', approaching with deference. "No, it's excellent as always, Roger. I just don't have an appetite today." The maitre d' nodded with a professional smile and moved away. Gerald sighed. He was tired of that emptiness that not even his financial empire could fill. 3 years since the divorce, and the loneliness only grew. His penthouse apartment in Kensington, valued at millions, was just a large, empty space where his own footsteps echoed. Outside, leaning against the restaurant wall for shelter from the rain, Julia watched the movement inside through the large glass windows. At just 9 years old, her large, expressive eyes contrasted with her thin, dirty face. Her curly hair, tangled from lack of care, framed a countenance that mixed innocence with a forced maturity due to life's circumstances. Her faded, torn dress was soaked, as were her bare feet, marked by the harshness of the streets. She hadn't eaten anything since the previous morning, when a lady had given her half a sandwich near Hyde Park Corner. Her stomach ached, and the smell of food wafting from the restaurant made that pain even more acute. Twice she tried to approach the entrance, but the security guard shooed her away with stern looks. "Get out of here, girl. You'll scare away the customers." On her third attempt, she seized the moment when the security guard answered a call on his cell phone and quickly slipped inside. The cozy warmth and delicious aromas enveloped her like a hug she hadn't received in a long time. Her eyes scanned the luxurious environment, the crystal chandeliers, the impeccably set tables, the well-dressed people chatting without worries. It was another world, a universe parallel to hers. It was then that she noticed Gerald sitting alone with that distant look that somehow seemed familiar to her. She vaguely remembered her father before he disappeared after her mother's passing. The same sad, lost expression. Something about that man awakened in her a courage she didn't even know she possessed. With her heart pounding, she walked between the tables, ignoring the astonished glances and indignant whispers of the customers. What is that child doing here? Where is the security in this place? It's unacceptable. Julia didn't hear them. Her eyes were fixed on the man at the table by the window. When she finally stopped before him, her legs trembled not only from cold but from fear and hope. Gerald looked up from his untouched plate and was surprised to find that small, drenched figure in front of him. Can I eat with you, Daddy?" Julia's voice came out shaky, almost inaudible, but clear enough for Gerald and the nearby tables to hear. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. The maitre d', realizing the situation, approached quickly with an expression that blended embarrassment and determination. "Mr. Morrison, I apologize profusely. I will call security immediately to remove this—" "No." Gerald's voice was firm, interrupting the maitre d'. Something in that moment, in that simple, desperate request, broke something within him, a barrier he didn't even know existed. He looked at the girl, at her large, hungry eyes, at her small, dirty hands, and felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. She stays. Bring her a plate, please, and a towel. The maitre d' hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Sir, with all due respect, we have rules and... Roger, I am asking you to bring a plate for this child. Gerald's voice did not rise, but it carried the weight of his authority. And if anyone in this restaurant has a problem with that, I can easily find another establishment to frequent from now on. The maitre d' swallowed hard, knowing Gerald's value as a customer, and nodded. As you wish. Sir, immediately. Julia remained still, unable to believe her desperate plan had worked. Gerald pulled out the chair next to him. Sit down. Little one. She obeyed, feeling out of place in that elegant environment, aware of the stares she attracted, but relieved to be protected from the rain and about to satisfy her hunger. A waiter quickly brought a soft towel which Gerald offered to the girl. Here, dry yourself a bit. Julia accepted the towel with trembling hands, wiping her face and soaked hair. Thank you, sir. My name is Gerald. What's your name? Caletius, how old are you, Julia? 9. She hesitated before continuing. Sorry, I lied. You're not my real dad. I just wanted something to eat. There was a disarming honesty in her words that deeply touched Gerald. Before he could respond, the waiter returned with a plate of hot soup and a basket of bread. To start, he explained, placing the food before Julia. The girl's eyes widened at the sight, and without waiting for an invitation, she grabbed a piece of bread and began to devour it with urgency. Large tears streamed down her face as she ate, as if each bite relieved not only physical hunger, but a much deeper pain. Slowly, Gerald gently instructed. There's plenty of food. No one will take it from you. Julia nodded, trying to control herself, but it was difficult when her stomach begged for more. Between bites, she began to tell her story. How her mother had fallen ill and passed away almost a year ago. How her father, unable to cope with the loss and financial problems, started drinking and eventually disappeared, leaving her in the care of an elderly neighbor who also couldn't afford to support her. I've been alone for 3 months, she explained, sipping the soup. Mrs. Clara, my neighbor, also got sick and went to live with her daughter in Brighton. I stayed in our house for a while, but then the landlord evicted us because the rent wasn't paid. Gerald listened attentively, feeling a mixture of compassion and indignation grow within him. As the girl spoke, he ordered more food. A simple filet mignon with rice and potatoes, followed by a chocolate ice cream that made Julia's eyes shine like never before. Where have you been sleeping? He asked, watching her eat each forkful as if it were a treasure. In different places, sometimes in Hyde Park Corner, under the benches when it's not raining. Some days I manage to stay at the bus station until the guards kick me out. And today, where would you sleep on a rainy night like this? Julia shrugged, as if the question held no importance. I'd look for a stairwell or a canopy. I always find a way. The naturalness with which she spoke about her precarious situation made Gerald feel a deep shame for his own privileges. He thought of his empty apartment, the unused guest rooms, the designer clothes he barely wore. Don't you have any relatives, Julia? Aunts? Grandparents? My grandma lived in Liverpool, but Mum used to say she had already gone to heaven before I was born. I guess I don't have anyone else. Gerald watched Julia finish her ice cream, his mind buzzing with thoughts. The rain continued to fall outside, forming rivers in the gutters of Oxford Street. The restaurant had emptied considerably, but the few remaining customers still cast curious glances in their direction. He checked his watch. It was past 11 at night. Julia, you need a hot bath and a safe place to sleep tonight. He paused, pondering the implications of what he was about to propose. I have a big apartment with several empty rooms. You can stay there tonight. The girl stared at him with a mixture of hope and distrust. On the streets, she had learned to doubt generous offers. Why are you helping me, sir? The direct question caught Gerald off guard. Why, after all, was he getting involved with this unknown child? Was it pity, guilt, or something deeper that even he didn't yet understand? Honestly, I can't explain. Maybe because, despite all the money and comfort, I'm as lonely as you are. He smiled slightly. Besides, I can't leave you on the street on a night like this. Julia pondered the answer, and after a few moments nodded. Okay, I'll go. But just for one night. Gerald called for the bill and asked his private driver to pick them up. While they waited, he requested the maitre d' to arrange some essential hygiene items and clothes for the girl. Call the Little Darling boutique nearby and ask them to bring some basic items in her size. I'll pay double for the urgency. Gerald's influence worked like magic. In less than 20 minutes, a package with children's clothes and hygiene products arrived at the restaurant. The maître d' delivered them discreetly, still visibly uncomfortable with the situation, but not daring to question the powerful client. When the driver arrived with the black Mercedes, Julia's eyes widened. "Is this your car?" "It's one of my cars," Gerald replied, opening the door for her. "Have you never ridden in a car like this?" The girl shook her head negatively, sliding onto the leather seat carefully, as if she feared dirtying it. Her small body seemed even smaller in that luxurious space. Gerald got in next and instructed the driver, "To the house, Albert." The journey from the restaurant to Gerald's apartment in Kensington was silent. Julia marveled at the city lights through the window, occasionally touching the leather of the seat, as if she couldn't believe its texture. Gerald watched her out of the corner of his eye, noticing every detail he had previously ignored. The thin fingers with broken nails, a small scar on her forehead partially covered by her curls, the way she tightly held the package of new clothes against her chest. When they arrived at the upscale building, the doorman looked surprised at the ragged child, but the respectful greeting he gave Gerald showed no questioning. In the private elevator that went directly to the penthouse, Julia remained quiet, as if she feared that any word or movement could break the spell of that moment and return her to the harsh reality of the streets. The elevator door opened directly into the apartment's main living room, revealing a spacious and elegant area decorated with designer pieces and contemporary artworks. Large floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the illuminated city, now covered by a veil of rain. "Welcome to my home," Gerald said, turning on the lights. Julia took a few hesitant steps, looking around with admiration. "It's like a palace," she murmured. "Are you a prince?" Gerald laughed for the first time in a long time, a genuine laugh. "No, far from it. I'm just a man who worked very hard." At that moment, a middle-aged woman emerged from one of the corridors. She wore a simple uniform and had her grey hair pulled back in a bun. Her kind, weathered face expressed surprise at seeing Julia. "Mr. Gerald." "I didn't know we had a visitor. Mrs. Zoe." "This is Julia. She'll be staying with us tonight." He paused before adding, "and possibly longer." The housekeeper looked from the girl to Gerald, clearly confused, but years of discreet service prevented her from asking questions. Instead, she offered Julia a warm smile. "Welcome, little one. I'll prepare one of the guest rooms." "Thank you, Mrs. Zoe. And could you also warm some milk and prepare a hot bath for her?" As the housekeeper moved away to perform her tasks, Gerald led Julia to the living room sofa. "You must be exhausted. You'll be able to rest soon." The girl nodded, but her eyes continued to scan every detail of the apartment with fascination. "Do you live here alone in this big place?" "Yes, well, with Mrs. Zoe, who takes care of the house and me too, in a way. She's been working here for over 20 years. He paused. "I was married once, but I divorced a few years ago. We don't have children. Why not?" The direct question, typical of childish innocence, touched an old wound. "My ex-wife and I, we never could. Sometimes, even if you want something very much, it doesn't happen." Julia seemed to ponder that answer with impressive seriousness for her age, and my mom used to say that sometimes God closes a door but opens a window. The child's simple words provoked an unexpected emotion in Gerald. For an instant he felt a lump in his throat. Before he could respond, Mrs. Zoe returned. "The bath is ready, young Lady Julia, and I've set out a clean nightgown for you to sleep in." Gerald noticed the girl's hesitation. "Go with Mrs. Zoe. She'll help you with your bath. And then you can have a snack before bed if you're still hungry." Julia stood up, holding the package of new clothes, but before following the housekeeper, she turned to Gerald. "Do you promise you'll be here when I come back?" "Promise you won't send me away during the night." The question, laden with fear and insecurity, squeezed Gerald's heart. What kind of traumas had that child already faced to fear being abandoned again? "I promise, Julia, I'll be here." Only after that assurance did she follow Mrs. Zoe down the hallway. When he was alone, Gerald poured himself a whiskey and walked to the window, watching the city below. What was he doing? What madness was this, bringing a street child into his home? Would there be legal consequences? What would his lawyer say? His brother? The partners of the construction company? And yet, despite all the doubts and rational questions, he felt an inexplicable certainty that he had done the right thing. That encounter in the restaurant couldn't be just a coincidence. There was something providential about it. His cell phone rang. It was Raphael, his younger brother. "Hey, Gerald, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Why aren't you answering?" "Sorry, Rafa, it's been an unusual night. Are you okay?" "Your voice sounds different." Gerald hesitated. How to explain what had just happened? "I'm fine. Just tired. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Sure. Actually, I called to confirm if you're going to the meeting with the Japanese investors. They arrive on Wednesday." "The meeting? The investors? Work?" For a few hours, Gerald had completely forgotten his professional responsibilities. "Yes, I'll be there. But I'll need to reorganize my schedule in the coming days." "Any problem?" No problem, just different priorities." After hanging up, Gerald went to his office and opened his laptop. He needed to understand the legal steps to help Julia. Should he contact social services? Look for shelters? Or was there a possibility of... His thoughts were interrupted by Mrs. Zoe's return. "Mr. Gerald, the girl is in the bath now. I prepared the blue room for her." The housekeeper hesitated before continuing. "May I ask what's happening? Who is this child?" Gerald sighed. "It's a long story, Mrs. Zoe. I found her at the restaurant, hungry and alone. She's been living on the streets for months after her father abandoned her." The housekeeper's expression softened. "Poor child, but what do you intend to do now? Will you take her to a shelter tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Gerald looked out the window at the city that seemed so small below. "I don't know yet. Honestly, I don't know. But a part of him already knew. A part of him had already made a decision that would change his life forever. He just needed the courage to admit it." Half an hour later, Mrs. Zoe brought Julia back to the living room. The transformation was striking. Clean, with her curly hair still damp from the bath and wearing a new nightgown, she looked like a different child. Her face, now without the layer of dirt, revealed delicate features and lightly flushed cheeks. Gerald felt a strange emotion seeing her like this, a mixture of joy and protectiveness he had never experienced before. "Do I look better?" she asked shyly. "You look beautiful, Julia." The girl smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her brown eyes. "Mrs. Zoe gave me chocolate milk and bread with butter. I've never had such delicious milk." The simplicity of the comment made Gerald reflect again on all the privileges he took for granted. "Come, I'll show you where you'll sleep." He led her down the hallway to the guest room Mrs. Zoe had prepared. It was a spacious room, with a king-size bed that made Julia seem even smaller. Clean Egyptian cotton sheets, soft pillows, and a light duvet made up the impeccable arrangement. "Is this bed just for me?" she asked incredulously. "Just for you." Julia climbed onto the bed carefully, as if she feared breaking it, and sank into the soft pillows with an expression of pure ecstasy. "It's like lying on a cloud," she murmured, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Gerald sat on the edge of the bed and covered her with the duvet. "Sleep well. Julia, we'll talk more tomorrow." But the girl had already fallen asleep, overcome by exhaustion and a sense of security she probably hadn't felt in a long time. Gerald remained there for a few minutes, watching her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell in a tranquil rhythm, and her face displayed a serenity that contrasted with the harsh reality she had lived until a few hours ago. It was at that moment, watching that sleeping child in his home, that Gerald made his decision. It wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, questions, perhaps even opposition from close ones, but something within him had irrevocably changed on that rainy June night. "I'll take care of you, Julia," he whispered, more to himself than to the sleeping girl. "I promise." Leaving the room, he found Mrs. Zoe in the hallway. "Has she fallen asleep?" "Like an angel," Gerald replied. "Mrs. Zoe, I need your help with something important." "Of course, sir. First thing tomorrow, I want you to buy clothes and everything a child her age needs. Don't economize, and I'd also like you to prepare the room properly for her, not just as a guest room." The housekeeper studied him for a moment, understanding the meaning of those instructions. "Are you going to keep her?" "I'm going to try. I don't know if I'll succeed legally, but I'll do everything in my power. He paused. I also need you to contact Dr. Maurice Preston, my lawyer, first thing in the morning. Tell him it's urgent. Mrs. Zoe nodded, a slight smile forming on her lips. You know, Mr. Gerald, I've worked for you for over 2 decades, and I've never seen you so alive. As tonight, the housekeeper's simple words echoed within him with a profound truth. Indeed, for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, as if he had woken from a long sleep, from a mechanical existence focused only on accumulating more money, more power, more status, without ever filling the emptiness that grew within him. The next morning, Gerald woke earlier than usual. For a moment, he wondered if the events of the previous night hadn't been a strange dream. But passing by the hallway and seeing the guest room door ajar, he knew it had all been real. He approached silently and peeked inside. Julia was still sleeping deeply, almost disappearing among the pillows and duvet. Her face displayed a serenity that contrasted with the harshness of her recent life. In the kitchen, Mrs. Zoe was already preparing breakfast. The aroma of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. "Good morning, Mr. Gerald. Did you sleep well?" "Better than in a long time," he replied, surprised by the truth of that statement. "Is the girl still sleeping?" "Like a log." "Poor thing, she must be making up for months of sleepless nights." Mrs. Zoe placed a cup of coffee before him. "I've already called Dr. Preston. He said he can be here at 10 o'clock. "Excellent." Gerald checked his watch. "It was only 7:30, and about the purchases I asked for. As soon as the shop's open, I'll arrange everything. Clothes, shoes, school supplies." She paused. "Do you think you'll get her custody?" The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Gerald took a sip of coffee, thoughtful. "I'll do my best. Mrs. Zoe, I know it sounds crazy, but—" "It doesn't sound crazy at all," the housekeeper interrupted him. "A rare occurrence in her over 20 years of service. It seems God put this girl in your path for a reason. You've always been a good man, but in recent years, after the divorce, you became so closed off, so distant. Perhaps this child is exactly what you need." Before Gerald could respond, they heard hesitant footsteps in the hallway. Julia appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Her curly hair was disheveled, and the nightgown, too big for her small body, dragged on the floor. "Good morning," she said shyly. "Good morning, little one." Mrs. Zoe replied enthusiastically. "Come sit here. Would you like hot chocolate, or do you prefer juice?" Julia's eyes widened at the options. "I can choose." "Of course you can. Then, hot chocolate, please." As Mrs. Zoe served the chocolate and placed bread, cakes, fruits, and other breakfast items on the table, Julia looked at everything with a mixture of fascination and distrust, as if she feared it could disappear at any moment. "You can eat as much as you like," Gerald encouraged. "No need to rush." The girl nodded and began to try a little of everything, her eyes lighting up with each new discovery. "I've never eaten such soft bread," she commented, biting into a piece of milk bread with butter. "At my house, when we still had a house, the bread was always hard." That simple comment made Gerald reflect again on the social contrasts that separated their realities. What for him was routine, a complete and fresh breakfast, for Julia represented an unimaginable luxury. "Julia, after breakfast, Mrs. Zoe will go out to buy some things for you. New clothes, shoes, school supplies." The girl stopped chewing, looking at him in astonishment. "School supplies? Am I going to school?" "Of course you are. Every child needs to study. But I'm behind. I haven't been to school in months." Gerald smiled. "Don't worry about that. We'll find a good school that can help you catch up." Julia lowered her eyes to her plate, distractedly poking a piece of cake with her fork. "But will I stay here? For how long?" The question hung in the air, laden with hope and fear. Gerald exchanged a quick glance with Mrs. Zoe before answering. "If you want to, and if it's legally possible, I'd like you to stay here with me, permanently." The girl looked up, her large eyes fixed on Gerald with an intensity that disconcerted him. "Like your daughter?" "Yes, Julia, like my daughter." She was silent for a long moment, processing that information. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "I'd like that." That morning, as Mrs. Zoe went out shopping, Dr. Maurice Preston, Gerald's personal lawyer, arrived promptly at 10 o'clock. He was a middle-aged man, elegant and discreet, known for his competence in complex legal matters. Gerald received him in the office, while Julia watched cartoons in the living room, an experience that seemed to enchant her. "So, Gerald, what's the emergency?" "Your secretary mentioned something about a child." Gerald recounted the events of the previous night, watching the lawyer's eyebrows rise higher and higher as the story progressed. When he finished, Dr. Preston adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Let me get this straight. You found a street girl in a restaurant, brought her to your home, and now you want to adopt her?" "Just like that. In short, yes." The lawyer took a deep breath. "Gerald, you're an intelligent man. You must know it's not that simple. There are legal procedures, social investigations, adaptation periods. And first of all, we need to verify if this child is truly abandoned. If the father is still alive, he has legal rights over her. What if he abandoned her? If he disappeared and left her on the street? Even so, legally, he would need to formally relinquish custody for you to start an adoption process." Dr. Preston paused. "Furthermore, there are social services, the family court. It's not a quick or simple process." Gerald rested his elbows on the table, interlacing his fingers. "How long would it take on average?" "In normal cases, the adoption process can take years. But given your financial conditions and your reputation, we can try to expedite some steps." The lawyer hesitated. "However, the first step is to locate the biological father. Without that, the girl would likely be temporarily placed in a shelter while the process runs its course." The idea of Julia in a shelter made Gerald feel a pang in his chest. "Is there no way to get temporary custody until we locate the father?" Dr. Preston pondered for a moment. "Perhaps, if we prove she was in a situation of abandonment and risk, and if you demonstrate conditions to provide a suitable environment." He paused. "But Gerald, I need to ask, are you sure about this? It's a decision that will completely change your life. Raising a child is not like managing a company. There are no quarterly reports or the possibility of dismissal when things get difficult." The question was valid, and Gerald knew it. He was about to take on a responsibility for which he had not prepared, and which would alter the course of his life forever. And yet he felt an inexplicable certainty. "I'm sure, Morris. I've never been so sure of anything in my life." The lawyer nodded, resigned. "In that case, let's get to work. First, we need to gather all possible information about the girl. Full name, date of birth, last known address, parents' names. Then I will begin the search for the father. In parallel, I will file a request for temporary custody, alleging the situation of vulnerability in which you found her." Gerald felt a momentary relief. "Thank you, Maurice. I know I can count on you. Just one more thing," the lawyer added, standing up. "It would be good if you could demonstrate that you are taking steps to create a suitable environment for the child. School enrollment, psychological support, that sort of thing. This would strengthen our custody request." After the lawyer left, Gerald went to the living room where Julia remained absorbed in cartoons. He sat beside her on the sofa. "Are you enjoying it?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It's so cool. At my house we had a small TV, but it broke. And on the street, I used to watch through the windows of electronics stores, but they always sent me away." Gerald again felt that mixture of compassion and indignation. "Julia, we need to talk about some things. So I can help you. I need to know more about you and your family." The girl's expression changed, becoming more serious and cautious. "What things?" "Ours. Your full name, for starters, and your parents' names." She looked away from the cartoons and fixed her gaze on Gerald. "Julia Suarez Smith. My mother was Joanna Suarez Smith, and my father is Anthony Charles Smith. I was born on September 12, 2014. That makes me 9, right?" "Yes, it does." Gerald hesitated before the next question. "And do you know where your father went when he disappeared?" Julia shook her head. "He drank a lot after Mom got sick. When she passed away, he got worse. Sometimes he would disappear for days. Then one day he left and never came back. Mrs. Clara, our neighbor, took care of me for a while, but she also got sick and had to go live with her daughter." "And do you know if your father has relatives? Brothers, cousins?" "So I think he has a brother in Liverpool, Uncle Sebastian, but I haven't seen him in a very long time." Gerald absorbed that information, knowing it would be useful for Dr. Preston in his searches. However, more than the objective data, what impressed him was the maturity with which Julia spoke about such painful subjects. A 9-year-old child who had faced more losses and difficulties than many adults. "Thank you for telling me this, Julia. It will help us resolve your situation." The girl stared at him with disconcerting intensity. "Do you really want me to stay here? Aren't you just saying that to make me happy?" "Yes, I do, Julia. Truly, even knowing I'm not rich like you, that I don't know how to talk like rich people." Gerald smiled, touched by the sincerity of that question, especially because of that. "You've taught me more about real value in the last 24 hours than I've learned in years of business." Mrs. Zoe returned in the early afternoon, accompanied by 2 store employees carrying several bags. There were clothes of all kinds, shoes, school supplies, toys, and even a new bicycle. Julia watched everything with a mixture of disbelief and ecstasy, as if she feared it was a dream from which she would soon wake. "All this is for me?" she asked, almost breathless. "All for you," Gerald confirmed. What followed was an afternoon of discoveries and simple joys. Julia tried on clothes, wore the first new sneakers of her life, drew with high-quality colored pencils, hugged soft teddy bears. With each new discovery, her face lit up with such genuine happiness that it warmed the hearts of Gerald and Mrs. Zoe. In the late afternoon, while Julia organized her new belongings in the room, now transformed to look more like a child's room. With vibrant colors and childlike decorations, Gerald's cell phone rang. It was Raphael again. "So are you going to explain why you didn't attend the meeting with the suppliers today?" Gerald cursed mentally. He had completely forgotten the meeting. "Sorry, Rafa, some personal, unforeseen circumstances came up." "Unforeseen circumstances? Gerald, since when do you let personal matters interfere with work? What's going on?" Gerald hesitated. How to explain to his brother the transformation that was occurring in his life? "It's complicated, Rafa. I prefer to explain in person." "Fine, then I'm coming over now, and I expect a convincing explanation." Before Gerald could protest, Raphael hung up. He sighed, anticipating his younger brother's reaction upon discovering about Julia. Raphael had always been more pragmatic, more focused on business and less sentimental. He would probably think Gerald had lost his mind. An hour later, Raphael arrived at the apartment. Gerald received him in the living room, noticing his brother's tense expression. "All right, I'm here. What was so important that you abandoned a meeting with key suppliers?" Before Gerald could respond, a child's laugh was heard from the hallway, and shortly after, Julia appeared running wearing one of her new dresses. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Raphael, partially hiding behind Gerald. Raphael looked from the girl to Gerald and then back to the girl with an expression of absolute perplexity. "Who is this child?" "Raphael, this is Julia," Gerald introduced, placing a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "Julia, this is my brother Raphael." The girl gave a small nod, still partially hidden behind Gerald. "Hi, Uncle Raphael." The word uncle seemed to hit Raphael like a punch to the stomach. He looked at Gerald, demanding an explanation with his eyes. "Can we talk in the office?" Gerald suggested. Turning to Julia, he added, "Little one, go play in your room for a bit while we talk, okay?" The girl nodded and ran down the hallway, casting one last curious glance at Raphael before disappearing. In the office, Gerald recounted the events of the last 24 hours, watching his brother's expression fluctuate between disbelief, shock, and concern. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Raphael exclaimed when Gerald finished. "Bringing a street child home? Starting an adoption process? Do you have any idea of the legal complications, the media exposure this could cause? Not to mention the irresponsibility of taking on the raising of a girl without any preparation or experience. I know it sounds crazy, Rafa, but something changed in me last night. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that truly matters." Raphael ran a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. "Gerald, you're the CEO of one of the country's largest construction companies. You employ thousands of people. You already do things that matter every day. It's not the same thing, and you know it. What we do is just business transactions. This," he gestured towards the hallway where Julia was, "this is about a life I can transform." 2 weeks had passed since that night at the Fasano restaurant. Gerald's life had transformed in ways he had never imagined possible. His apartment, once silent and impeccably organized, now displayed visible signs of Julia's presence. Colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator, small sneakers by the entrance, children's books scattered across the living room. With Dr. Preston's help, Gerald had obtained temporary custody for 90 days, during which the authorities would investigate the whereabouts of the girl's biological father. He had also enrolled Julia in one of London's best private schools, where she received extra lessons to make up for the lost months. On that Saturday morning, Gerald watched Julia eat breakfast. She wore unicorn print pajamas, and her curly hair was tied in 2 pigtails, a creation of Mrs. Zoe, who had become a kind of surrogate grandmother to the girl. "Gerald," Julia called, her mouth full of cereal, "can I go to the park today?" He smiled. It was the first time she had asked for something like that, a sign that she was beginning to feel more at ease, more secure. "Of course, you can. We can go to Hyde Park after lunch. What do you think?" Julia's eyes lit up. "I've never been to Hyde Park. Mom always said she would take me, but it never worked out." Gerald felt that familiar pang in his heart when he heard Julia mention her mother. Despite all the comfort and affection he tried to provide, he knew he would never completely fill the void left by the loss she had suffered. "Then today will fulfill your mother's wish," he said, stroking the girl's hair. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Dr. Preston. "Gerald, good morning. I have news about our search." "Tell me," he replied, moving slightly away from the table so Julia wouldn't hear. "We located the girl's father, Anthony Charles Smith, 42 years old. He's working as a gardener at a resort in the Hamptons." Gerald felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Does he know about Julia? About her situation? Apparently not. According to information we gathered, he left London about 7 months ago after his wife's death. He abandoned his job, his home, and unfortunately his daughter. He's living in staff accommodation at the resort. Does he have alcohol problems? From what we've ascertained, yes. He's had a few stints in rehab clinics, but nothing in recent months. Gerald took a deep breath, processing that information. What does this mean for the adoption process? Legally, he still holds parental rights. For you to adopt Julia, he would need to formally relinquish custody. Dr. Preston paused. "I suggest you go personally to talk to him. Explain the situation. See if he's willing to sign the relinquishment documents. And if he's not, in that case, we would have to file a lawsuit for the termination of parental rights alleging abandonment. It's a longer and more complex process." Gerald looked at Julia, who was happily eating her cereal, oblivious to the conversation that could determine her future. "I'm going to the Hamptons today. Can you arrange the necessary documents?" "And certainly. I'll send everything to you by noon." After hanging up, Gerald returned to the table, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "Julia, I need to go on a work trip today. It will only be one day. I'll be back tomorrow." The girl stopped eating, her face suddenly apprehensive. "Are you going to leave me alone?" The question, laden with fear, squeezed Gerald's heart. "No, little one. I would never do that. Mrs. Zoe will stay with you, and you can still go to the park. I promise that when I come back, we'll go together." Julia nodded, but Gerald noticed that her previous joy had diminished. Even after 2 weeks of constant care, the fear of abandonment was still deeply rooted in her. "Is it a pinky promise?" she asked, extending her pinky finger. Gerald intertwined his pinky finger with hers, sealing the pact. "Pinky promise. And I never break my promises, remember?" The smile timidly returned to Julia's face. A few hours later, Gerald was in the company helicopter, flying over the New York State coast towards the Hamptons. The landscape below was stunning, the blue-green of the sea contrasting with the intense green of the Atlantic forest, but his thoughts were far from that natural beauty. What would he say to the man who had abandoned his own daughter? How would he react when he saw him? Gerald had always considered himself a controlled, rational man, but the idea of meeting Anthony stirred intense and contradictory emotions within him. Anger at the abandonment, understanding for the pain of loss, fear that he might want Julia back. The resort where Anthony worked was one of the most luxurious in the region, frequented by celebrities and high-ranking executives. Gerald knew the owner, which had facilitated obtaining information about the man's whereabouts. Upon disembarking, he was greeted by the manager, who discreetly led him to a secluded corner of the gardens, where a middle-aged man was tending a flower bed. Despite the resort's clean uniform, there was something defeated in his posture, in his slightly curved back, in his slumped shoulders. "Mr. Anthony," the manager called, "this gentleman would like to speak with you." The man turned and Gerald saw Julia's father's face for the first time. Despite the sunburnt skin and premature wrinkles, he could perceive the resemblance in the brown eyes, the shape of the nose in some features Julia had inherited. Anthony looked at Gerald with an expression of confusion. "Thank you," Gerald said to the manager. "I'd like to speak alone if possible." The manager nodded and moved away, leaving the two men alone among the flower beds. "Do you know me, sir?" Anthony asked, clearly uncomfortable with the presence of a well-dressed man wanting to speak with him. "Not directly," Gerald replied, "but I know your daughter, Julia." The name seemed to hit Anthony like a physical blow. He staggered slightly and his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt, shame, and fear. How is she?" he asked with a trembling voice. "She's fine now. She's safe, fed, attending a good school?" Gerald paused, measuring his next words. "But not thanks to you." Anthony looked away, unable to face the implicit accusation. "I had no choice," he murmured. "After Joanna passed, I couldn't even look at Julia without seeing her mother's face. The pain was unbearable. So you preferred to abandon her, to leave her alone on the streets?" The man looked up, surprised. "On the streets? No. I left her with our neighbor, Mrs. Clara. An elderly lady, but she always took good care of her." Gerald felt anger rise within him. "Mrs. Clara fell ill and went to live with her daughter in Brighton. Julia was left alone, was evicted from the apartment for non-payment of rent, and spent months living on the streets of London." He paused, observing the impact of his words on the man's face. "Do you know what that means for a 9-year-old child? Hunger, cold, constant fear." Anthony paled, leaning against a nearby tree. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I thought Mrs. Clara would take care of her until I recovered. Recover or hide, because that's what you did. You ran away from your responsibilities as a father." The man lowered his head, and Gerald saw tears falling to the ground between them. "You're right, sir. I was a coward. The pain of Joanna's loss was more than I could bear, and drinking seemed the only relief." He paused, wiping away tears with the back of his calloused hands. "But I love my daughter. I always have. Love isn't just feeling, Mr. Anthony. It's responsibility, it's presence, it's sacrifice." Gerald took a deep breath, controlling the anger that threatened to take over his voice. "I found Julia in a luxury restaurant, where she had snuck in to try to get food. Do you know what she told me? 'Can I eat with you, Daddy?' She called me Daddy, a complete stranger, because she was so desperate for protection that she saw in me some possibility of help." Anthony sobbed, his entire body trembling. "Is she with you now?" "Is she okay?" "Yes, she's with me. I took her to my home that night, gave her food, clean clothes, a safe roof over her head. And now I want more. I want to adopt her legally, give her my name, ensure she never again experiences hardship or abandonment." The man finally looked up at Gerald, a look of painful understanding on his face. "Is that why you came looking for me? To ask me to give up her custody?" Gerald nodded. "Yes. I need your formal relinquishment of parental rights for the adoption to be possible." A tense silence settled between them. Anthony looked away towards the horizon, where the sun was beginning to approach the sea. "Does she ask about me?" The question was so laden with hope and fear that Gerald felt a flicker of compassion for the man before him. "Sometimes," he answered honestly. "She talks about how you changed after her mother's passing, how you started drinking, disappearing for days." Anthony nodded, an expression of pain crossing his face. "Alcohol? It destroyed everything. My marriage, my ability to care for my daughter, my dignity." He hesitated before continuing. "I've been sober for 2 months. That's why I came here, to get away from the temptations of the city. I've been working hard, saving every penny with the hope that one day I could return and get my life back. Get Julia back." Those words awakened in Gerald a fear he didn't know existed within him. The idea of losing Julia now, after everything they had lived through, was unbearable. "Mr. Anthony, I have all due respect for your struggle against addiction, but I need to think about Julia's well-being. She's been through enough trauma. She's finally adapting, feeling safe, developing as any child should." Gerald took an envelope with the documents prepared by Dr. Preston from his pocket. "These are the papers for the relinquishment of parental rights. If you truly love your daughter, consider what would be best for her now." Anthony took the envelope with trembling hands. Can I think about it? It's a very difficult decision. Of course, Gerald handed him a card. Here's my contact. But don't take too long. Julia deserves stability. Before walking away, he added, I know you love her in your own way, and she certainly loves you too. I'm not here to judge you or punish you, Mr. Anthony. I'm here for Julia, only for her. Leaving the thoughtful man among the flower beds, Gerald returned to the resort hotel, where he would spend the night before returning to London. The conversation with Anthony had been more difficult than he had imagined, stirring conflicting emotions. Part of him pitied the man destroyed by the pain of loss and addiction. Another part could not forgive the abandonment that had put Julia in danger. In the hotel room, Gerald called home. Mrs. Zoe answered. How is Julia? She's fine, Mr. Gerald. A little anxious about your absence, but I tried to distract her. We went to the park nearby, bought ice cream, and now she's drawing. Can I speak with her? There was a brief pause, and then Julia's voice sounded on the other end of the line. Hello? Gerald? Hi, little one. Is everything okay there? It is. Mrs. Zoe took me to the park, but it wasn't the same without you. She paused. Are you really coming back tomorrow? Yes, I am. Pinky promise, remember? Julia giggled softly. I remember. I'm making a drawing for you. It's a surprise. I can't wait to see it, Gerald replied, feeling a wave of affection warm his chest. Now go finish your drawing. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, Gerald stood for a long time watching the sunset from the hotel window, thinking about how his life had completely changed in just 2 weeks. Before, his days were filled with meetings, negotiations, multi-million-dollar contracts. Now he found himself eager to return home and see a drawing made by a 9-year-old child. The room phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was the reception. Mr. Morrison, there's a man named Anthony Smith wishing to speak with you in the lobby. Gerald felt a start. Tell him I'm coming down. In the spacious hotel lobby, Anthony looked out of place, still wearing the resort uniform, uncomfortable among the elegant guests. When he saw Gerald approaching, he stood up from the sofa where he had been sitting. Mr. Morrison, I apologize for bothering you. I know you must be tired from your trip, but I couldn't wait. Gerald indicated a more secluded corner of the lobby where they could speak privately. Anthony followed him, holding the envelope with the documents. I thought a lot about what we discussed, he began, his voice low and trembling. About Julia, about what happened, about what's best for her. Gerald waited in silence, feeling a growing tension. I love my daughter more than anything in this world, Anthony continued, the words coming out with difficulty. That's why I made my decision. He opened the envelope and took out the documents for the relinquishment of parental rights. Gerald saw that they were already signed. I signed everything, Anthony said, extending the papers. Julia deserves much more than I can give her now. Perhaps one day when I'm truly recovered, when I'm a better man, maybe she can forgive me and accept me back into her life. But I don't want her to wait for that. I want her to be happy, to have opportunities, to grow up loved and protected. Gerald took the documents, feeling the weight of the decision that man had just made. Thank you, he said simply. I know how difficult this must have been. Anthony nodded, silent tears streaming down his face. Can I ask for something in return? What? A photo of her, just so I can remember and know that she's well. Gerald hesitated only for a moment before taking his cell phone from his pocket. He found a recent photo of Julia, smiling in her new room, hugging a teddy bear. This was taken a few days ago, he explained, showing the screen to Anthony. The man looked at the image with an expression of love and pain so profound that Gerald felt a lump in his throat. She's beautiful, Anthony murmured. She looks so happy. She's starting to be happy again, Gerald confirmed. And I promise you I'll do everything in my power to keep her that way. Anthony touched the screen softly, as if he could feel his daughter through that digital image. Take good care of her, he asked, his voice almost inaudible. Tell her that her father loves her, that he always loved her even when he couldn't show it. I will, Gerald promised. When Anthony finally walked away, heading out of the hotel with his head down, Gerald felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at the success of his mission, sadness for the pain of that man, and an unexpected gratitude for him having put his daughter's well-being above his own desires. Back in his room, he called Dr. Preston. He signed the documents, he informed. All of them. Excellent, the lawyer replied. That tremendously simplifies the process. Now we can proceed with the formal adoption petition. With the biological father's relinquishment and your financial and moral conditions, I have good expectations that the process will be relatively quick. How long, approximately? Hard to say precisely. Normally it would be months, maybe a year, but with your resources and the clear situation of abandonment, followed by the formal relinquishment, we could be talking about 3 to 4 months. Gerald felt a wave of optimism. Do your best to expedite it, Maurice. I want to give Julia the security of a permanent home as soon as possible. I'll do my best. And, Gerald, congratulations. I confess I had my doubts about this situation, but you seem truly committed. I am, Maurice. More than I've ever been with anything in my life. 3 months had passed since Gerald's trip to the Hamptons. London's autumn was already giving way to winter, and the changes in Gerald's life were as profound as those of the season. The adoption process progressed with unusual speed, thanks to Gerald's influence and Dr. Preston's competence. Anthony's formal relinquishment had been fundamental, removing the biggest legal obstacle. Now they were in the final phase of the process, awaiting only the hearing with the judge who would formalize the adoption. On that Saturday morning, Gerald watched Julia through the living room window. She was riding her bicycle in the condominium's designated area, under Mrs. Zoe's watchful eye. Her hair, now well cared for and longer, swayed gently in the breeze as she pedaled with increasing confidence. It was hard to believe that this was the same fragile, frightened girl he had found in the restaurant months ago. Gerald's cell phone rang. It was Raphael. "Hello, brother. I'm downstairs. Can I come up?" Gerald smiled. His relationship with his brother had improved significantly in recent weeks. After the initial shock of the decision to adopt Julia, Raphael had gradually begun to accept and even appreciate the girl's presence in their lives. "Of course, I'm waiting for you." Minutes later, Raphael entered the apartment carrying a package wrapped in colorful paper. "Where's my favorite niece?" "Your only niece, you mean?" Gerald corrected with a smile. "She's downstairs riding her bike." Raphael approached the window, watching Julia pedal. She learned quickly. "When you said you'd bought her a bike, I thought it would take months for her to get the courage to use it." "Julia surprises me every day," Gerald replied. "Despite everything she's been through, she has incredible resilience." Raphael nodded, thoughtful. "You've changed, you know." "How so?" "You're more light, more present." Raphael gestured towards the window. "Before, you were always in the office, always worried about the next contract, the next acquisition. Now, I find you at home on a Saturday morning, watching a child ride a bicycle." Gerald smiled, recognizing the truth in those words. "Life has a strange way of showing us what really matters, doesn't it?" "Speaking of things that matter," Raphael said, placing the package on the table, "I brought a gift for Julia." "You're spoiling this girl." "Last week it was that collection of children's books. Before that, the jigsaw puzzle." "It's my uncle's right," Raphael defended with a smile. "Besides, she deserves it." At that moment, the apartment door opened and Julia ran in with Mrs. Zoe close behind. "Uncle Raphael!" the girl exclaimed, running to hug him. Raphael lifted her into his arms, spinning her in the air. "How's my favorite cyclist?" I managed to go all the way around the condominium without stopping," she announced, proud. "That deserves a celebration," Raphael declared, putting her down and pointing to the package on the table. "I brought something for you." Julia's eyes sparkled with excitement as she tore open the gift wrap. Inside was a small children's digital camera, waterproof and shockproof. "A real camera," she exclaimed, amazed. "For you to record your special moments," Raphael explained. "It comes with a memory card and everything. And you don't have to worry if you drop it or get it wet. It's super resistant." Julia hugged the camera to her chest before throwing herself into her uncle's arms. "Thank you, Uncle Raphael. It's the best gift in the world." Gerald watched the scene with a mixture of emotion and gratitude. When he had brought Julia home on that rainy night, he had never imagined that she would conquer not only his heart but also that of his brother, traditionally more reserved and business-focused. "Why don't you take some pictures in the condominium garden?" Mrs. Zoe suggested. "The sun is beautiful today." "Can I, Gerald?" Julia asked, looking at him expectantly. Of course you can. Just don't go too far and be back for lunch. The girl nodded enthusiastically and ran off, already testing her new camera. When they were alone, the brothers sat in the living room with coffee that Mrs. Zoe had prepared. So, Raphael began, how's the adoption process going? In the final stretch. We have a hearing scheduled with Judge Marina Hayes next week. If all goes well, the adoption will be formalized. And how are you feeling? Gerald reflected for a moment before answering. Nervous, happy, scared, all at the same time. Normal, Raphael commented. You're about to officially become a father. It's a big responsibility. I already feel like her father, Gerald confessed. The paper will only formalize what already exists in the heart, Raphael smiled. A genuine smile he rarely displayed in the corporate environment. You know, when you first told me about Julia, I thought you had completely lost your mind. A 48-year-old bachelor, a self-proclaimed workaholic, adopting a street child. It seemed crazy. And now? Now I think it was the wisest decision you've ever made. Raphael paused, taking a sip of coffee. She brought life into this house. And into you too. Gerald nodded, recognizing the truth in those words. Before Julia, his life was a sequence of practically identical days, filled with work, meetings, and occasional solitary dinners in expensive restaurants. Now each day brought surprises, challenges, and above all, joy. Speaking of life, Raphael continued, placing his cup on the table, how are things at the construction company? It's been weeks since I've seen you in the office full-time. I'm delegating more, Gerald explained. I realized I didn't need to be involved in every decision. We have a competent team. I never thought I'd hear that from you, Raphael laughed. The man who used to personally review every contract, no matter how small. Priorities change, Gerald replied simply. At that moment, Gerald's cell phone rang again. It was Dr. Preston. Gerald, I have news. The judge brought the hearing forward. It will be on Monday at 2 p.m. Monday? But that's... Gerald checked his mental calendar. 2 days from now. Exactly. There was an opening in her docket and, knowing your interest in expediting the process, I thought it best to confirm the date. Gerald felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. We'll be there without fail. Thank you, Maurice. Upon hanging up, he noticed Raphael watching him with curiosity. The final hearing was brought forward to Monday, he explained. That's great, Raphael exclaimed. We need to celebrate. How about a special lunch tomorrow? I can book a table at Fasano. At Fasano? Gerald raised his eyebrows, surprised by the suggestion. Yes, I thought it appropriate. It's where it all began, isn't it? It would be a full circle. From the first meal together to the celebration of the adoption. Gerald pondered the idea for a moment. I think Julia would like that. She always talks about that night, you know. Not as something traumatic, but as the moment her life changed. Then it's settled. Tomorrow, lunch at Fasano. I'll make the reservation right now. As Raphael moved away to make the call, Gerald remained thoughtful. The Fasano. The place where months ago, a small drenched figure had snuck in and changed his life forever with a simple question. Can I eat with you, Daddy? The next morning, Gerald helped Julia get dressed for the special lunch. She had chosen a light blue dress, the first one Gerald had bought her. I want to wear this one, she had explained. It was the first gift you gave me. Now, as he adjusted the ribbon that held her hair, Julia watched him through the mirror with her large brown eyes. Gerald, when the adoption is finalized, can I call you Daddy? The question, asked with such simplicity and hope, caught Gerald off guard. He felt a lump in his throat and needed a few seconds to control his emotion. Of course, you can, Julia. Nothing would make me happier. She smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Then I'll start practicing. But I'll only say it for real after the judge says I can. Gerald laughed, admiring the girl's determination and sense of order. It's a deal. At Fasano, they were received with the usual deference reserved for important clients. Gerald noticed it was the same maitre d' from that fateful night, Roger, who now looked at Julia with an expression of recognition and astonishment. Mr. Morrison, what a pleasure to welcome you again. Your table is ready. As they followed the maitre d' to the table, Gerald felt Julia's small hand squeeze his. He's the man who wanted to send me away that day, she whispered. Yes, but today you are a special guest, Gerald replied, gently squeezing her hand. Raphael was already waiting for them at the table, accompanied by an elegant woman Gerald immediately recognized, Claire, his ex-wife. Claire? Gerald stopped, surprised. "I didn't know you would be here," Claire smiled, standing up to greet him. "Raphael invited me. He said it would be a special family lunch." Her gaze turned to Julia, who was partially hiding behind Gerald. "And this must be the famous Julia. Raphael told me a lot about you." Julia watched the woman with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. "Hi," she murmured, without leaving her improvised hiding place. Gerald cast a questioning look at Raphael, who shrugged with an enigmatic smile. "I thought it would be good to get the whole family together," he explained. "Claire is part of our history, even after the divorce." Claire had been married to Gerald for 8 years. The marriage had ended amicably, mainly due to their inability to have children, a particularly strong desire of Claire's. After the divorce, they maintained a cordial though distant relationship. "Come, Julia," Claire called, pulling out the chair next to hers. "I want to get to know the girl who achieved what I never could, transforming Gerald Morrison into a father." Julia looked at Gerald, seeking approval. He nodded with an encouraging smile, and the girl finally approached, sitting beside Claire. The lunch proceeded surprisingly pleasantly. Claire had a natural way with children, and soon Julia was chatting animatedly with her about school, cartoons, and her new friends in the condominium. Gerald watched the interaction with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "She's special," Claire commented at one point when Julia was distracted showing photos from her new camera to Raphael. "She has a sparkle in her eyes, a resilience. I understand why you fell in love with her." "It was instantaneous," Gerald confessed. "Something I never imagined possible." Claire smiled, a slightly melancholic smile. "Funny how life works, isn't it? For years we tried to have a biological child without success. Now, years after our divorce, you find a daughter in the most improbable circumstances." "There's no logical explanation," Gerald agreed. "I just know that when she walked into that restaurant, drenched and hungry, something changed inside me. As if an emptiness I didn't even know existed began to be filled." Claire nodded, her eyes softening with a deep understanding. "You know what they say, Gerald. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who's willing to hold your hand when you need it." Claire's words echoed within Gerald with a profound truth. He looked at Julia, laughing at something Raphael had said, and felt a wave of paternal love so intense it almost took his breath away. "Thank you for coming today," he said to Claire. "It means a lot to me, and I believe it does for Julia too. I couldn't miss it. After all, it's not every day that Gerald Morrison officially becomes a father." The rest of the lunch proceeded in an atmosphere of anticipated celebration. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate ice cream that made Julia's eyes sparkle, Raphael raised his glass. A toast to the new Morrison family. "May this be just the beginning of a journey full of joy." Everyone raised their glasses, including Julia with her glass of juice, in an emotional toast. At the end of the meal, as they were about to leave, Roger, the maitre d', timidly approached Gerald. "Mr. Morrison, if you'll allow me." He hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "I'd like to apologize for the way I acted that night. I didn't understand the situation, and I was insensitive." Gerald was taken by surprise by the sincerity of the apology. "It's all right. Roger, you were just doing your job." The maitre d' shook his head. "Even so, I feel I need to say this." He turned to Julia. "Young lady, I apologize for the way I treated you. Seeing you now so happy and well cared for makes me realize that I was prejudiced and wrong in my judgment." Julia looked at the man with her large, expressive eyes. "It's okay," she replied simply. "I was dirty and wet. I understand why you didn't want me to come in." The maturity and understanding present in that response surprised everyone. Roger seemed particularly touched. "You are very kind, young lady. I hope you'll always come back now as a family." As they left the restaurant, Julia held Gerald's hand firmly. On the other side, to his surprise, she spontaneously extended her hand to Claire, who accepted it with an emotional smile. On the way back home, in the car driven by Albert, Julia fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the day's emotions. Gerald watched her tenderly, thinking about how that little person had transformed his existence. "She's excited for tomorrow," Raphael commented, who was accompanying them. "She showed me the dress she's going to wear to the hearing. Must have explained 3 times why she chose that one specifically." Gerald smiled. The blue one with embroidered flowers. She says it's her lucky dress. Nervous for tomorrow? A little, Gerald admitted. Not for the result itself. Dr. Preston assured me it's practically a formality at this point. But it's such a significant moment. Raphael nodded understandingly. The moment you officially become a father. It's natural to feel the weight of it. When they arrived at the apartment, Gerald carried Julia, still asleep, to her room. Carefully not to wake her, he took off her shoes and covered her with the light duvet. For a long moment he watched her sleep, marveling at the peace on her little face. Tomorrow, he whispered more to himself than to her, tomorrow we will officially be a family, little one. And I promise to do everything in my power, so you never again feel hunger, cold or fear. Leaving the room, he found Raphael in the living room, looking thoughtfully out the window. You know, Gerald, he began without turning, I always thought you were complete. You had money, power, professional respect. What more could anyone want? And now? Raphael turned, a soft smile on his face. Now I realize you were just existing, not truly living. The change in you is impressive. For the better, I hope, Gerald commented, sitting on the sofa. Definitely for the better. You're more human. Raphael paused. More like our father. The mention of their father, who had passed away more than a decade ago, caught Gerald off guard. Joseph Morrison had been a simple man who built a small construction company from scratch, with hard work and solid principles. Gerald and Raphael transformed it into an empire, but often at the cost of the values their father cherished. He would be proud of you now, Raphael continued. Not for the empire we built, but for opening your heart to that girl. Gerald felt his eyes moisten. Thank you, Rafa. That means a lot to me. Monday morning dawned with an exceptionally blue sky over London, as if nature wanted to contribute to the importance of that day. Gerald woke early, long before his alarm was set. He had slept little, alternating between excitement and anxiety for what was to come. After a quick shower, he went to the kitchen, where he found Mrs. Zoe already preparing the special breakfast they had planned. Good morning. Mr. Gerald, she greeted him with a warm smile. The big day has finally arrived. Good morning, Mrs. Zoe. Has Julia woken up yet? Not yet. I thought it best to let her sleep a little longer. She was so agitated last night that it must have taken her a while to fall asleep. Gerald nodded, remembering how excited the girl had been the night before, talking non-stop about the hearing, about her new dress, about how it would finally be to have a real last name, as she called it. I've prepared everything she likes, Mrs. Zoe continued, indicating the carefully set table. Pancakes with honey, fresh fruit, hot chocolate. It looks more like a birthday breakfast, Gerald commented, smiling. And isn't it a kind of birthday? The birth of a new family. The housekeeper's simple yet profound observation touched Gerald. Indeed, it was a type of birth they would celebrate that day. Are you nervous, sir? Mrs. Zoe asked, placing a cup of strong coffee before him. A little, Gerald admitted. Not about the hearing itself. Dr. Preston assured me it's practically a formality at this point. But it's such a transformative moment, Mrs. Zoe completed. I understand perfectly. When my son was born, even after 9 months of waiting, the moment I held him in my arms, nothing prepared me for that. Gerald looked at the housekeeper in surprise. In over 20 years of working together, it was the first time she had mentioned a child. I didn't know you had a son, Mrs. Zoe. A melancholic smile crossed the woman's face. Jose Carlos. He lives in Liverpool with his family. We don't see each other much with the distance and all. She paused. But that's a topic for another day. Today is young lady Julia's day. As if invoked by the mention of her name, light footsteps were heard in the hallway, and soon Julia appeared at the kitchen door, still in her pajamas, her hair disheveled from sleep. Good morning, she said, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Then, as if suddenly remembering what day it was, her eyes widened. Today's the day. Gerald smiled, opening his arms to receive her. Yes, little one. Today's the day. Julia ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with an enthusiasm that almost unbalanced him. Her small body vibrated with excitement. I'm so nervous. What if the judge doesn't like me? What if she thinks I don't deserve to be your daughter? Gerald gently pushed her back, holding her by the shoulders to look directly into her eyes. Julia, listen to me. There is absolutely nothing you can do or say that would make anyone, especially the judge, think you don't deserve a family. Do you understand? The girl nodded, but there was still a shadow of insecurity in her gaze. But I don't know how to talk like important people. What if I say something wrong? The judge just wants to make sure you're happy and safe. It's not a test, little one. It's just a confirmation of what we already know in our hearts, that we are a family. The words seemed to calm her a little. Mrs. Zoe approached, stroking the girl's hair. Now come and have your breakfast. I made everything you like. Julia's eyes lit up when she saw the set table. Pancakes with honey. And they're heart-shaped. Of course, Mrs. Zoe replied with a smile. It's a day of love, isn't it? After breakfast, Gerald helped Julia prepare for the hearing. The blue dress with embroidered flowers, chosen especially for the occasion, looked perfect on her. Mrs. Zoe arranged her curly hair in a simple but elegant hairstyle, partially pinning it back with delicate clips. You look beautiful, Gerald said when she was finally ready, spinning before him to show off the dress. Really? She asked, her face lit up by his approval. Absolutely beautiful. The phone rang. It was Raphael, informing them he was on his way to accompany them to the hearing. Minutes later, the doorbell announced his arrival. Look at you, Raphael exclaimed upon seeing Julia. The most beautiful niece in the world. The girl giggled, blushing slightly. I'm your only niece, Uncle Raphael. Even so, the most beautiful, he insisted, handing her a small box. A gift for the occasion. Julia opened the box carefully, revealing a delicate necklace with a butterfly-shaped pendant studded with small colored stones. It's beautiful, she exclaimed, amazed. The butterfly symbolizes transformation, Raphael explained, helping her put on the necklace. Like the transformation you brought into our lives. Gerald watched the scene with emotion. His brother, traditionally pragmatic and business-focused, had allowed himself to be touched by Julia's presence in ways he had never imagined possible. Dr. Preston arrived shortly after, carrying a briefcase with the final documents needed for the hearing. Everyone ready? He asked after the greetings. Judge Hayes is known for her punctuality. It would be good to arrive with some anticipation. Gerald checked his watch. It was 12:30 p.m. The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., but with London traffic, it was prudent to leave with plenty of time. We are ready, he confirmed, holding Julia's hand. The journey to the courthouse proceeded in a silence heavy with expectation. Julia looked out the Mercedes window, seemingly absorbed in the urban landscape, but Gerald could feel the tension in her small hand gripping his tightly. Is everything all right? He asked softly, leaning towards her. The girl hesitated before answering. What if he shows up? Gerald didn't need to ask who she was referring to. Your biological father? He signed all the necessary documents, Julia. There's no reason for him to show up today. But what if he changed his mind? What if he wants to take me away? The question, laden with fear, revealed a dread Julia had apparently been keeping to herself. Gerald exchanged a quick glance with Raphael before answering. That won't happen, little one. Legally, he relinquished all rights. And more importantly, he understood that you are happy and safe with me. It was a decision he made thinking of your well-being. The answer seemed to calm her a little, but Gerald could see that the fear was still there, hidden deep within those expressive eyes. It was understandable. Despite all the security he tried to provide, Julia had experienced too much abandonment in her short life to fully trust that happiness wouldn't be snatched away from her again. They arrived at the courthouse almost 40 minutes early. The imposing building, with its modern architecture and glass facade, was a little intimidating. Julia squeezed Gerald's hand even tighter as they ascended the entrance steps. Inside, Dr. Preston guided them through the corridors until they reached a waiting room near the judge's chambers. Other couples and families waited there, some visibly nervous, others talking in low voices. Are these all adoption cases? Gerald asked the lawyer discreetly. Most of them, yes. Judge Hayes dedicates Mondays exclusively to cases related to childhood and youth, with an emphasis on adoptions. Julia observed everything with curious eyes, especially the other children present. A girl a little younger than her, holding the hand of a middle-aged couple, smiled shyly in her direction. Julia returned the smile. The minutes dragged on. Gerald checked his watch every few moments, feeling his anxiety grow. Raphael tried to distract them with light conversation, but it was clear that everyone was tense. Finally, at 1:50 p.m., a judge's assistant appeared in the room. Julia Soares-Smith and Gerald Morrison. Gerald and Julia stood up, followed by Raphael and Dr. Preston. "Judge Hayes is ready to receive you," the assistant informed with a gentle smile. The judge's chambers were welcoming, different from the austere image Gerald had imagined. There were plants in the corners, colorful paintings on the walls, and even some toys discreetly organized on a shelf. Judge Marina Hayes was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and lively eyes behind modern framed glasses. Her smile was warm as she rose to greet them. "Good afternoon, everyone. Please have a seat." Gerald, Julia, Raphael, and Dr. Preston took their places in the chairs arranged before the judge's desk. Julia, now visibly nervous, clung to Gerald's hand as if her life depended on it. "So," Judge Hayes began, opening a folder with documents, "we are here to finalize the adoption process of Julia Soares-Smith by Mr. Gerald Morrison." She looked directly at Julia with a gentle smile. "You must be Julia." The girl nodded shyly. "Yes, Mom. You don't need to be afraid, dear. I'm just here to ensure that everything is being done with your best interests in mind." The judge consulted some papers before continuing. "I see from the reports that you've been living with Mr. Morrison for almost 4 months now. How has that experience been?" Julia hesitated, looking at Gerald as if seeking encouragement. He nodded slightly, squeezing her hand. "It's been wonderful," she finally replied, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "Gerald is the best person I've ever met. He gave me a home, food, clothes. But the most important thing is that he makes me feel safe and loved." The girl's simple and direct words touched everyone in the room. Judge Hayes smiled, visibly moved. "And would you like to officially become his daughter? To have the Morrison last name?" Julia's face lit up. "More than anything in the world. I already feel like his daughter in my heart, but I want everyone to know." The judge nodded, satisfied, and turned to Gerald. "Mr. Morrison, adopting a child is an enormous responsibility. It's not just about providing material comfort, but also love, education, values. Are you prepared for this?" Gerald took a deep breath before answering. "Judge Hayes, when I found Julia that night in the restaurant, something changed inside me. I realized that despite all professional success and material comfort, my life was empty. Julia filled that emptiness in ways I never imagined possible." He paused, emotional. "I don't know if I'm completely prepared for all the challenges to come, but I promise I will do everything in my power to be the father she deserves, to protect her, guide her, and above all, love her unconditionally." The judge listened attentively, her observant eyes studying the interaction between Gerald and Julia. "The social worker's reports are extremely positive," she commented. "A genuine bond is evident between you, which is the most important thing in any family, biological or otherwise." She examined a few more documents before continuing. "The biological father, Anthony Charles Smith, formally relinquished parental rights without any indication of coercion. This considerably simplifies the process." She looked up at Dr. Preston. "Are all documents in order, Doctor?" "Yes, Your Honor. We provided everything as requested." Judge Hayes nodded and looked at Julia again. "I have one more question for you." "Julia, it's an important question, so think carefully before answering." The girl nodded, her expression suddenly serious. "If for some reason your biological father appeared now and said he wanted you back, what would you do? How would you feel?" Gerald felt Julia's hand squeeze his even tighter. The question directly touched on the fear she had expressed in the car. For a moment the room was completely silent. Julia began, her voice trembling. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I would be sad. Not because I don't love my biological father. I do. But he couldn't take care of me. He was very sad after my mother passed, and the sadness made him get lost." She paused, carefully choosing her next words. "With Gerald, I feel safe. I feel like I can be a child again, without worrying if there will be food the next day, or if I'll have to sleep on the street. So if my biological father appeared, I would tell him I love him, but that now I have a new father, a father who chose to love me, even without any obligation." The answer of surprising wisdom and maturity for a 9-year-old child moved everyone in the room. Judge Hayes had moist eyes when she finally spoke. That is one of the most beautiful and sincere answers I have ever heard in these chambers, Julia. Thank you for sharing your feelings with us. The judge organized some papers, signing them methodically. Well, I see no reason to prolong what is already clear to everyone here. She looked at Gerald and Julia with a warm smile. Based on all reports, presented documents, and most importantly, the evident bond between you, I officially declare the adoption of Julia Suarez-Smith by Gerald Morrison approved. Julia let out a small cry of joy, hugging Gerald with all her might. He wrapped her in his arms, feeling tears of happiness well up in his eyes. From today, the judge continued, your full name will be Julia Suarez-Smith Morrison, retaining your original middle name and incorporating your new father's last name, as requested in the process. Judge Hayes stood up, walking around the desk to approach them. Congratulations to the new Morrison family, she said, extending her hand to Gerald. It is always a joy when we can officially unite people who already love each other as family. Gerald shook the judge's hand, too emotional to speak properly. Thank you, he finally managed to say. Thank you for making this moment possible. Judge Hayes knelt down to Julia's height. And you, young lady, have just officially gained a father who already loved you with all his heart. Take good care of him, all right? Julia nodded, tears streaming freely down her face. I will. I promise. Raphael approached, hugging Gerald and Julia simultaneously. Officially an uncle now, he said with an emotional smile, and the proudest uncle in the world. Dr. Preston collected the documents, visibly satisfied with the result. The updated birth certificate will be ready in a few days. I will personally ensure that the process is as quick as possible. As they left the judge's chambers, Gerald carried Julia in his arms, both still too emotional to say much. In the corridor, they were surprised by a small group waiting for them. Mrs. Zoe, Claire, and some close friends of Gerald's. Surprise, Raphael exclaimed. I thought we should celebrate properly. Mrs. Zoe was the first to approach, hugging Julia when Gerald put her down. My beautiful girl, now officially a Morrison. Claire also approached, handing Julia a small bouquet of flowers. Welcome officially to the family. Julia, the girl, accepted the flowers, still stunned by the surprise and emotion of the moment. Thank you for coming, she thanked, looking at everyone. I never had so many people who cared about me before. Well, now you do, Gerald replied, placing his hand on her shoulder. And you always will. Raphael cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Well, I think an occasion like this deserves a proper celebration. I've reserved a space in Hyde Park for a small event. Nothing too formal, just a lunch among friends and family to celebrate this special day. Gerald looked at his brother, surprised and touched. You thought of everything, didn't you? Raphael shrugged, but his smile was genuine. I just wanted to make this day unforgettable for both of you. The group headed to Hyde Park, where a space had been prepared with tables, discreet but elegant decorations, and a small buffet. Colorful balloons floated here and there, and a banner with the words, Welcome to the family, Julia, had been stretched between two trees. During the small celebration, Gerald watched Julia interact with everyone, her little face illuminated by happiness. She ran between the tables, proudly showed off her new butterfly necklace, and occasionally returned to him, as if needing to make sure he was still there. At one point, she approached him with a serious expression. Gerald, can I ask you something? Of course, little one. What is it? She hesitated, nervously playing with the hem of her dress. Now that the judge said I can I call you Daddy? The question, asked with such hope and vulnerability, hit Gerald right in the heart. For a moment he couldn't answer, emotion forming a lump in his throat. Nothing would make me happier, Julia, he finally managed to say, his voice choked. It would be the greatest honor of my life. The girl's face lit up with the most radiant smile he had ever seen. Then, Daddy, she tested the word as if savoring its sound. My daddy. Gerald hugged her tightly, feeling his heart could explode with happiness in that perfect moment. 3 years had passed since that special day at the courthouse. Life in the Kensington penthouse continued at a completely different pace than Gerald could ever have imagined before that rainy night at Fasano. It was a sunny Sunday morning, and Gerald watched Julia, now 12 years old, sitting on the balcony reading a book. Her curly hair, longer now, swayed gently in the breeze. Time had brought visible transformations to the girl, She was taller, her childish features beginning to give way to more defined adolescent contours. But what impressed Gerald most was the internal transformation, the security in her gaze, the confidence in her posture, the serenity of someone who knows they are loved unconditionally. "Daddy," she called, noticing she was being watched. "Come see what I'm reading." Gerald smiled. Even after 3 years, the word Daddy, spoken in Julia's voice, still sparked a wave of emotion within him. It was a title he carried with pride, a privilege he never took for granted. "What is it, daughter?" he asked, approaching. "It's a photo album Uncle Raphael gave me," she explained, showing the carefully organized pages. "Look, he put all our photos in order, from that first night to my birthday party last month." Gerald sat beside her, observing the images that told the story of the past few years. The first photo showed Julia newly arrived, her face still marked by life on the streets, but already with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Then came images of her at school, in the park, learning to swim in the condominium pool, celebrating her first Christmas with the family, blowing out birthday candles. "Look at this one," Julia pointed, laughing. "That's when we tried to make chocolate fudge and almost blew up the kitchen. Mrs. Zoe almost had a fit." Gerald laughed, remembering that day. The kitchen, Mrs. Zoe's sacred territory, had been a chaos of chocolate and sprinkles with burnt pans and stains on the ceiling. But it had been worth it for the sound of Julia's laughter. They continued turning the pages, reliving moments, the trip to a coastal town in Cornwall, where Julia saw the sea for the first time, the day she won a medal in the school swimming competition, her English course graduation, the Christmas when Gerald invited children from a shelter to celebrate with them. "This is my favorite," Julia said, pointing to a photo where they were hugging, watching the sunset on the beach. They weren't posing for the camera. Raphael had captured the moment spontaneously. There was something magical in the image, in the way the setting sun illuminated their faces, in the look of absolute trust Julia directed at Gerald. "Mine too," he agreed, feeling a pang in his chest as he remembered that perfect moment. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their contemplation of the album. Mrs. Zoe, who now officially lived with them. Gerald had insisted that, after so many years of dedicated service, she deserved a permanent place in the family. Went to answer it. "It must be Uncle Raphael," Julia commented, carefully closing the album. "He promised to take me to the sports museum today, but it wasn't Raphael whom Mrs. Zoe led to the balcony. It was a middle-aged man, with a simple but dignified appearance. He wore a well-pressed shirt and dress trousers, like someone who had dressed with special care for an important occasion. His eyes, restless and nervous, scanned the room until they found Julia. Gerald felt his heart race as he recognized Anthony Charles Smith, Julia's biological father. The girl stood motionless, the photo album pressed against her chest like a protective shield. There was recognition in her eyes, mixed with a complex web of emotions: surprise, confusion, a trace of fear, perhaps even a spark of joy. "Julia," Anthony murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "How you've grown." Gerald instinctively approached his daughter, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. There was no hostility in his gesture, only the natural instinct of a father to protect his child in the face of the unexpected. "Mr. Anthony," Gerald greeted, striving to keep his voice calm and neutral. "We weren't expecting your visit." "I know I should have called first," the man replied, visibly uncomfortable, "but I feared that they wouldn't let me see her." Gerald felt Julia lean slightly into him, seeking reassurance. But to his surprise, the girl didn't seem frightened, just cautious. "What do you want?" she asked directly, with a maturity that surprised both men. Anthony took a deep breath before answering. "I wanted to see how you are, to know if you're well, happy." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "And also, to ask for forgiveness for what I did." A heavy silence followed that declaration. Mrs. Zoe, who had remained discreetly by the door, exchanged a meaningful glance with Gerald. "Why don't we talk in the living room?" Gerald suggested, feeling that this moment deserved a more appropriate setting than the balcony. "Mrs. Zoe, could you bring us some coffee?" The housekeeper nodded and withdrew, while Gerald led Anthony and Julia to the spacious living room. They sat down, the girl instinctively choosing the spot next to her adoptive father. "How did you find us?" Gerald asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. It wasn't difficult, Anthony admitted. Your name is well known and the adoption was in the newspapers at the time. He looked directly at Julia. I followed from afar. I saw the photos in the magazine when you won that swimming competition. I kept all of them. Julia seemed to absorb every word, studying the man before her, as if trying to reconcile the image of the father who had abandoned her with the man who now sat before her, visibly nervous but sober and dignified. Why now? She finally asked. After so long. Anthony lowered his gaze to his own hands before answering. I needed to rebuild myself first. I needed to be sure that I was truly recovered, that I wouldn't disappoint you again. Are you sober? Julia's direct question demonstrated a surprising understanding of the situation. 3 years and 2 months, he replied, with a trace of pride in his voice. After that day in the Hamptons when your father visited me, something changed in me. I realized that if I truly loved you, I needed to become a better person. Someone you wouldn't be ashamed to meet one day. Gerald observed the interaction in silence, amazed at the way Julia conducted the conversation, without accusations or resentment, simply seeking to understand. I have a good job now, Anthony continued. I'm a maintenance manager at a hotel in East Hampton. I have a small apartment, but it's tidy. He paused. I didn't come to disrupt your life or cause problems. I just wanted you to know that I'm well, and that I never stopped thinking about you. And I wanted to see with my own eyes that you are happy. Julia looked at Gerald as if seeking guidance. He nodded slightly, encouraging her to follow her heart. I am happy, she finally said, turning back to Anthony. Very happy. I have the best father in the world. She squeezed Gerald's hand. But sometimes I still miss you. And Mom. Anthony's eyes filled with tears. Your mother would be so proud of you. Julia, she always said you would be someone special. Mrs. Zoe returned with a tray of coffee and biscuits, momentarily breaking the emotional intensity of the conversation. As she served, Gerald observed how Julia seemed to process it all, her expressive face revealing the whirlwind of emotions she felt. I brought something for you, Anthony said after thanking for the coffee. He took a small wrapped package from his pocket and extended it to Julia. It was your mother's. She would want you to have it. With slightly trembling hands, Julia opened the package, revealing a delicate silver locket. Opening it, she found a tiny photo of Joanna, her mother, smiling. I remember this photo, she murmured, her eyes welling up. She was laughing because I had made a funny face. Anthony nodded, emotional. Exactly. You had just lost a front tooth and were making faces in the mirror. For a moment, the three shared a silence laden with memories, some painful, others precious. It was Gerald who finally spoke. Mr. Anthony, would you like to stay for lunch? Raphael will pick us up later to go to the sports museum. Perhaps you'd like to join us. The invitation, genuine and unexpected, caught Anthony off guard. He looked from Gerald to Julia, uncertain. I'd love to, but I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition, Julia interrupted, making her own decision. I want you to come. I want to show you the medals I won in swimming. The relief and gratitude on Anthony's face were visible. With a simple gesture, Julia had offered not forgiveness, but an opportunity, a chance to know the wonderful person she had become, not as a father, but perhaps as a friend. I'll call Raphael and let him know we'll have an extra guest, Gerald said, standing up. As he moved away to make the call, he watched Julia showing the locket to Mrs. Zoe, the housekeeper examining it with admiration. Anthony watched them with an expression that mixed joy and a sweet melancholy, the expression of someone who knows they have lost something precious, but finds comfort in seeing that precious thing flourishing. At that moment, Gerald felt a profound certainty. True family is not defined only by blood or legal documents. It is built day after day through choices, commitments, and above all, love. Anthony's presence did not threaten his connection with Julia. On the contrary, it offered the girl an important piece of the puzzle of her identity. That simple question asked 3 years ago, "Can I eat with you, Daddy?" had unleashed a transformation none of them could have predicted. A hungry child found a home. A lonely man discovered purpose. A family was forged not by fate, but by the conscious choice to love and protect. And in that sunny living room, as he watched his daughter reconnect with a part of her past without fear, Gerald knew there was no greater fortune in the world than the privilege of being called Daddy by that extraordinary girl who had taught them all the true meaning of family. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Gerald and Julia's story has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional journeys like this one, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this narrative, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the bonds that unite us. Don't miss our next content. Share in the comments if this story stirred emotions in you.